Good evening, good evening, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get started in about a minute and a half. Opportunity to share this out, get it in front of as many people as you possibly can. All month long, we're doing pre-broadcasts. Pre meaning before. Last week we did pre-education. Today we're doing pre-employment. We'll finish up the last couple of weeks of this month with pre-engagement, premarital counsel. And the idea is not just before, but it's dealing with pre-counsel, pre-advice. Okay. So we'll kick off in about a minute. Hope everyone's having a good week. It has come and gone. I don't know what part of the United States or the world you live in, but in the South, it's been the South. That's all I can say. It has been warm, and not only warm, but quite humid. So we are experiencing it, needless to say. Again, we'll kick off in a moment. I don't have any theme music for this particular broadcast. And given enough time, I will certainly catch up in that respect. But share this out, get this out. I didn't plan it this way, but this is graduation season here. Graduations start either this weekend or next weekend. I don't particularly recall because I don't have anyone graduating from high school. College graduations are already commencing. So this just so happens to be probably a great time to be doing these subjects. Again, last week, if you missed it, on Facebook or YouTube, we did pre-education, and we talked about, it's 9 o'clock, we talked about, how to set your course and what you need to consider. Now, we're not going to get ultra specific because each person's circumstance is specific to them. But I want to just kind of touch over some things if possible. And feel free to chat with, post some stuff, comment, and we can bounce off your comments as well. If you have some things that you've been thinking about, great. Let's bring those things forward. Good evening to you once again. I am Gabe Matthews, your host. And let's chat. So as I said in my write-up, I actually have it here open. This is not a new thing. People have been receiving pre-employment counseling for many years. I don't know how far back, job agencies, employment agencies, go. But I suspect as far back as employment agencies go, there has been pre-employment advice. And just to be honest, parents to their children, somebody seeking employment through a friend or some kind of other contact likely got some kind of advice about how to go about getting the job that they were seeking. So this is not new. So again, I'm not going to get too specific because each of those situations are too specific to try to address in a general form. But I want to first just put out there, you know me, I come right to it immediately. This ain't new. This is not new. But if you recall what I said in the write-up, the pandemic is new. Now, it's been around for over 2 years, but it's new. The last time we've had a pandemic to this proportion, none of us were born, let alone talking about trying to get a job, because that was 100 years ago. And so some people are working their jobs. They're doing just fine. This is of no consequence to them, but you may have a student in your home getting ready to graduate. They are saying they don't necessarily want to go right to school, and that's maybe turning your stomach. But let me say this to you, to those parents who have a high school student in the home who, how do I say this? Respectfully speaking, if you're honest, you know your child is not a student. That's not what they do. And so everything they're talking about is employment of some sort. They're not talking about going to a trade school. They're not talking about going to a university. They don't want to deal with anything related to employment. I mean, in education. And I know the tendency as a parent, having been a step parent of literally every single child that I was a stepfather over is grown, every single one. The youngest just turned 20 in December. And I actually had conversation with her, taking her to Louisiana, I'm in Louisiana, taking her to California last year. And we just had a brief opportunity to talk on that nice 20-some hour drive. And I, kind of asked her what her intentions are. Very bright student, 4.0 student when she was in school, on and on and on and on. Well, she moved out here after high school, and despite how intelligent, how smart, how capable scholastically she is, she opted to go to work. Now, understand, she graduated in 2020, and minimum wage and all this kind of stuff got obliterated. Jobs that typically would have paid, minimum wage, even less, were paying $9, $10, $11, $12 an hour. And she was one of those ones who quite adroitly, to be honest with you, quite cleverly, was able to get into, I think Bath and Body Works is where she was working, if I remember correctly. It's been a couple of years now. And she was able to get a decent salary. And if I remember correctly, she was telling me when I picked her up from work one time that she had, a couple of the businesses in the mall where she was working here in the area who were actually bidding for her, if you will, and trying to entice her one was trying to entice her to leave where she was working. And I told her, work that. Now, I said to her, taking her back to California to live, consider education, because if you really want it, and it's still the same path, and I know we did education last week, but education is ultimately going to be, unless you have a tremendous ability that has immediate marketing elements to it. So let me say that. So you might have your team listening, and you just went, well, you know me. If you're gonna have them listen, I'm gonna be candid and I'm gonna be clear, right? There are roads that can be, and look, every single generation has had somebody make good, I don't want to say rich, but make good without education. Every single one. As a matter of fact, my son, technically my niece's generation, which he's a part of, he's just toward the end of that generation. There are people in their generation, she's turning 32 in what, a week or so. There are people in her generation who are making money and did not go and get a, now she just got a master's. But there are people her age who are not going to get a master's or a bachelor's or an AA degree for that matter. And they are via YouTube, as YouTubers or whatever they call them, they are making substantial living. Probably doing better than I am. Now, yes, it's true, it's rare. And that's but listen to me. That's always rare. I think sometimes we say things about, I'm that guy. I'm 48 years old. So I'm that guy, but I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to fall right into the same traps that my parents and my parents' parents and parents' all fall into when we get old and we start worrying about security, and we're thinking about our security, and we're giving advice to young, strong, vibrant people, young people who might have the guts and the moxie to go out there and get it done. And I don't think it's one size fit all, just to simply say every single person should go the way of education. Because no generation has had every single person who has become what we classify, or most people, I don't, but most people classify as a success economically, go by way of education. And we know this to be true. Every generation is going to have actors. Every generation is going to have athletes. Every generation is going to have a progeny. Every single solitary one is going to have somebody rise from the ashes, excuse me, create something, Excuse me. Excuse me. Allergies are a beast. To create something, to create something, to do something, to become something that does not require, listen to me, formal education. Now you can argue with that, but the fact is, I can name 100 people without blinking right now, and you can't tell me if they got an AA, a BA, a MA. You can't tell me. As a matter of fact, I'll just name the whole thing. Actors, musicians, athletes who are making more money than you and I will ever see in a lifetime if we put all our money together. Well, okay, that's not reliable. It's not. And yet, how many of you, including me, are following these people on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? How many of us are buying their clothes? How many of us are wearing their shoes? See, it's hypocritical. I didn't plan to go here, but since I'm here, let me do it. It's hypocritical for us to put out our money to go watch a movie of an actor who might not have graduated from Juilliard School of Acting, and they're making millions and billions of dollars. Filmmakers making billions of dollars, didn't go to film school, and we're paying them, and then looking at our children and our grandchildren and people who are close to us and telling them there's no money in what you're trying to do. Why don't you just be honest and tell them there's money in it, obviously, because we just went to the movies, we just went to a concert, we just paid. There's people working behind the scenes makes more money than I make. They're technicians. Now, some of them probably went to school, but the technician working behind the scene is not necessarily making as much as the person on the stage. Now, look, I am not saying that every single young person graduating from high school can build a career in front of a camera. Obviously not. But statistically speaking, every generation has had those who have done it. Who have done it. Every single solitary generation. And not all of them, after they retired from their careers, went on to be drug addicts. Not all of them went on to get off into all kinds of trouble. The notion, statistically speaking, NFL, NBA, NHL, that all of the players for all time, and most of these athletes, most of these sports, professionally speaking, are 50 years old, 75 years old. I think NBA is 75 years old now. Are you trying to tell me that every one of those NBA players lost their money? Are you trying to tell me that every single one of them ended up broke? No. Now, did some of them end up broke? Yes. And it didn't matter if they had a college education or not. So understand, if we're going to talk honestly about pre-employment advice or counsel, we have to be willing to talk about the depth and the breadth of it all. There are some people you might be in contact with that I will never know who actually do have the exceptional skill and ability. And if you just tell them, well, I advise you to just go to school, and they go, look, ain't nobody going to talk to me. I'll talk to you. I'm here to talk to you. I have met people my age who have told me I had opportunities, but my mama, but my daddy, but my Meemaw and Peepaw and Medea and Grandma and Grandpa, whatever term you give them, told me, don't follow my dreams, don't use my skills, and just go to school and get you a solid, safe job. But since the pandemic, you didn't see me turning that corner, I'm right back where I started. Since the pandemic, how many jobs are truly safe? At some point, somebody's got to say what we all know to be true. There are some jobs that are not truly safe. We thought they would be safe. We were sure they would be safe, but nobody saw a pandemic And when I say nobody, obviously those who study those things did. And there's been other epidemics over the last several years, but no one saw it to the degree of the economic decline across the world. There's a global economic decline. And as I talked about last week, we see that the middle class jobs almost literally across the world are gone. And when you're talking about education, higher learning, even that, and I know my niece just got a master's degree, and I know people get master's degrees. I work with people who are getting licensings and all those types of things. So what I'm going to say, take it any way you want to take it, but you can't tell me what I'm saying is untrue. The fact is, there are hundreds, thousands of people over the next couple of weeks who are going to get masters, not bachelors, master's degrees. And depending on what their master is in, they may not see that lucrative job that's going to pay them. And when I say lucrative with inflation, I mean you got to start at 50,000. Because you got to remember, if you got a master's degree, you got student loans about 50,000. So getting a job making 50,000 sounds great to me. I was a school teacher. I got paid $50,000 a year. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But I was also living in a metropolitan. I was living in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And many people I've come across do not want to live in the hustle and the bustle of a Houston, of a Los Angeles, of a Dallas. You don't want to live in the hustle and bustle and the traffic so you can make that kind of money. Keeping in mind the cost of living is going to be relative. So when you're looking at your children who are graduating, your grandchildren who are graduating, take a real good hard look before you start talking and examine who you're talking to. Do they have the real promise that if they go the path of education, that the education will produce for them the kind of income that will allow them to not just live in their own place and drive a car? No, quality of life. If you're going to go and get into $30,000 and $40,000 and $50,000 worth of student loan debt, then you really want to get the kind of information that's going to put you in a position to be able to actually pay the debt, actually pay it. Not promissory pay it, not deferment until the end of time, because you're never able to take that education and parlay it into a job, turn it into a job where the moment you start making money, here they come with the student loan to garnish your checks. Because now you're making $30,000 a year, which is not a lot of money, ladies and gentlemen. But hey, you've been deferring and deferring and deferring, and now they want their money. So if you're going to go the way of education for the sake of employment, then you have to really think. Now that we're dealing with employment, I can talk about it. You have to think about, is this education at least doesn't have the potential to translate into viable employment? And when I mean viable, I mean not only pay some bills, save a couple of dollars, but pay my student loan. So let me go back a step. You might have right now, and I really need you to think about this. Think this through. That's one of my new and becoming easily one of my favorite phrases. You got to think it through. I know you love your grandchild. I know you love your child. You think they are the best thing since sliced bread, the smartest thing on the planet. You live in some little town in some city in the Midwest, and they are the top student out of 30 students. I don't mean any disrespect. Please stay with me. They're the top student out of 30 students, and they grew up in a little town with 2,000 people. And I'm being generous. Do you really think they're ready to go and be a little fish in a big pond, in an ocean? So while you're encouraging them, and yeah, go over to so-and-so, the biggest city near you, and go get this education and make this kind of money, I understand why you're saying that, because they were valedictorian, salutatorian of their high school class of 62 people. Hey, cool, I get it. But when you're talking about an employment path, we really got to think it through. You got to really think it through. Yes, we all want to believe And I'm going to say this and get in trouble, but you know me, I can handle it. Just like I keep running across people who believe that for every woman, there is a single bachelor man who is seeking to be in a relationship. Notice what I did there. I keep coming across these women. Okay, for every woman, there is a man. And per capita, we know, statistically speaking, in most places and in most cases, that's not true. Even though we got the data to prove that's not true, there are people who still want to tell themselves that for every single woman who wants to get into a relationship, there must be, and you don't have anything to support that, anything to back that up. Statistically speaking, that's not true. And in the same way, those people talk, there are people who are saying, for every person who wants to get a good paying job, there is a good paying job. Stop lying. You're lying. You're not even trying to fib. You're not even just trying to be optimistic. You're lying. You know you're lying. They do statistical analysis on this stuff. If you're watching the news, I don't even watch the news. But I could come across an article that tells me this information. I don't have to guess at this stuff. The jobs aren't being created fast enough that are paying the kind of money. I love sarcastically when people say, yeah, all these lazy people, they just want to collect unemployment. They just want to sit around and do nothing. They've been cut that unemployment. They've been stopped giving the extra unemployment, and people still aren't going to work. And when I say aren't going to work, I mean into jobs that you can live on. And even when I used to try to explain it, I done got tired, I gave up. I tried to explain to people who I thought was intelligent enough to think past their emotion. You got to think past your emotion. You got to think it through. That's literally what that means. You got to think past your emotion. Don't get rid of your emotion. You have to think past your emotion. Are there enough jobs out there that you can live on and work one job? No. No. And we all know it, but we don't want to hear it. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to face it because we still have our grandma and grandpa and Meemaw and Medea and Old Man River. We still got this old thinking that we use to judge people, and especially the people close to us. And then we're also raising our children and grandchildren, and we're saying things to them from that old thought as if we forget we're in a blasted pandemic and the jobs just aren't there to take care of yourself. They're not there. If you're talking to an 18, 19, 20-year-old and you're talking about going to make $9, $10, $11, $12 an hour at Taco Bell, that's one thing. If you're talking to a 35-year-old man with 2 kids, how dare you tell him to go make $13 an hour at Taco Bell? Just because you want the satisfaction of knowing he's working. Gabe, I'm a taxpayer. I'm tired of these lazy people. Why don't you do some research before you open your mouth? It ain't that hard. I don't mean any disrespect, but good Lord, have mercy. Learn some stuff before you start spewing what you think is wise advice. You're wrong. And I know you ain't crunched your numbers because you keep saying the same thing. I advise you to close your mouth. I said it. And if you don't want to be on my page, Facebook page and YouTube page, love you. Bye. I told you, I deal in truth. I don't deal in, quote, reality, because that's left up to interpretation. What's the actual truth, ladies and gentlemen? The middle class jobs starting at $35,000, $40,000 a year and up with the opportunity to get raises is gone. Those jobs are gone. So unless you're looking to be a school teacher in a growing or large school district, the money's not there. I said it. Police department, money ain't there. Fire department, money ain't there. Ask some people. I know people who have worked in these venues, and they had to work for 20 and 30 years to see the kind of money that we're talking about. You're not coming out of college and just walking on to a place and getting $40,000 a year. Not in most cases. And again, student loans. Well, Gabe, you're wrong. My niece just got a master's degree and she just scored a 12 and she's making $60,000 a year. Ask her what her student loans are. While you're talking, ask her what her student loans are. Ask her. And if she has any intent on paying them back. Oh, you ain't gonna ask? See, we gotta talk realistically. We have to understand when we're talking about employment, we're not talking like this is 1920. When we're talking about employment, we're talking about 2022. And we're talking about the means by which to not only, now watch this, take care of yourself now, but, and this is where I ain't even got tough yet. Let me get tough now. I ain't even got tough. Let's get tough. We're going to have to start looking at jobs in terms of their longevity. The longevity of jobs was easily assumed. Was easily assumed. My dad was on his job for 30-something years. My brother's been on his job for 30-something years. I work in a field where there's jobs, yeah, with a certain amount of education, true. And I do like what I do. But let me talk candidly. No medical coverage. The mental health field is not doling out medical coverage. Just not doing it. It's not happening. Oh, they'll pay you a nice hourly wage. They'll pay you a nice hourly wage. Don't get it twisted. You come in with a bachelor's degree, you come in with a master's degree, you're going to get a nice hourly wage. But it don't mean you're going to get medical coverage. Listen to me. It doesn't mean you're going to get medical coverage. It doesn't mean that. So now, bachelor's degree, I'm working in the mental health field. I'm making $20 an hour, let's say, $21, whatever the case may be. I'm feeling great about myself. I'm making money hand over fist, and then I get sick. Then I got to be off work. Because notice, that's $20 an hour. Oh, yeah, the money is there. And no, that money's going to be there, whether you're there or not. Immediately when I got hired where I work, I had not only clients, but I even had the two people who interviewed me, the two owners, and asked me, well, we want to know if you're going to be with us. I come to find out they've got major turnover. And I get a little bit more than a decent hourly wage. So then you got to ask yourself the question, why is it such high turnover, given the fact that you make such a decent wage? And trust me, I'm well past minimum wage, well past. Well, one, I don't got medical coverage. So the decision that I've made to work in this company, if I stay with this company long term, I am doing so with the understanding that so Obamacare has got to stay strong, something like that. There's going to have to be subsidized medical care. Now, notice what I said. Somebody just got mad. See what happened? See, you got to think it through. So yeah, I'm making a decent wage. Don't get it twisted. Working full time, out there in the hot sun. But I'm not getting the medical coverage. If I leave where I am, I can go get a job making a significant hourly wage, significantly less hourly wage, and get medical coverage. See what I mean by the pandemic? See what I mean by we have to talk differently now? When we're plotting our educational and employment courses of life, we have to think differently. We have to think, yeah, the politicians are debating, trying to provide everyone medical coverage. And not everybody is for that. Look, let's just be honest. Not everybody's going to vote for the government to provide medical. I don't care what Canada's doing. Not everybody's going to want to do that. For whatever reason. Okay? And I don't need anybody trying to send me messages and getting on here. Hey, what you got to do is look, nah, this ain't what this is about. Don't come at me. I'm old enough to figure that out on my own. Thank you. Love you. I don't want that right now. Appreciate you though. I don't need anybody sending me anything about Gabe, go over and call these people and get this, that. Shh. What I'm telling you is what 20 million Americans are dealing with. And you might not want to, you might think that every individual person, you got the solution. And they just go get this medical coverage because you suggested it and they're good. Do you know how many people with full medical coverage can't get surgeries they need? See, before you start talking about just go over there, Gabe, and get that, that's why I'm shutting you down before you get started. Have you really done an investigation to those medical coverages that you're suggesting? Do you know what the person's pre-existing conditions are? Do you know what their pre-existing conditions are before you start saying, well, Gabe, there's no reason to be without coverage and go just get you some coverage? No, I got to get coverage like I got to get a job. I need coverage that's going to cover what I need, not just coverage. Not just coverage. See, we're running our mouths and we're not stopping to think. What if I need eye surgery, but the coverage I have, yeah, it'll pay for me to get some medicine for this, but it won't cover my eye surgery. And I'm paying out a premium every month just to keep that. Now I got to try to what? Add more insurance? Now all of a sudden my hourly wage doesn't see? We in a pandemic time, people, and most are projecting that even though the pandemic, quote unquote, is over, we're never going to be back to whatever we used to be. And I don't even know what that was. So if that is true, and if the economists and the people who know this stuff and study this stuff tell you, now we may not be dealing with inflation forever, but the fact is we're never going to get back to that pre-pandemic time. And if what they're saying is true, because we're already anticipating the next pandemic, and as a matter of fact, Corona just keeps turning into something else. Omicron, B2.12.8ZYT. It ain't going nowhere. So the reality of it is we are in what I believe is a pandemic holding pattern. And we're going to stay right here. We had Ebola. We have SARS-1. On and on and on and on. We're right in this space. We're not leaving this space. And so since we're in this space, ladies and gentlemen, then we got to think about employment very strategically, which you should be doing anyway. But you got to think about the longevity of the job you're in. I've already presented the next thing. You got to think about, are you going to look for the job to provide you for your medical coverage? And believe it or not, I'm one of millions of people who are working in jobs and the jobs cannot provide them medical coverage. And if the government says that every job, every employer, small business and otherwise, is going to have to provide some form of medical coverage, some of these businesses, which are hanging on by a thread, are going to close. They're going to close. Point blank, period. They're going to close their doors. Is that a threat? I'm not a business owner. I'm just telling you what the statistics tell us. I'm just telling you what the facts tell us. So when you're thinking about employment, you've got to think about, is this the type of job that's going to be around for a long time? And it may be so precise like this. Is this the type of position? Is not just this job or this company, but is this the type of position that's going to be around for a long time? Is this the type of position that will remain open, or is this one that will get phased out? See, terms like phased out, some of you have living experience with that. I got a friend in Dallas. I think she lives in Dallas. Her job was phased out. Good paying job. I'm freaking out. Like, girl, what you gonna do? She's like, hey, I've been through this before. She was all calm. I'm like, well, girl, I'm praying for you. She's been through that. Another friend and acquaintance, more or less in California, her job was phased out. And she didn't sweat it. She had enough unemployment. Up, there we go. She was able to find another job, relocate, See, now we start, see what happens? See, I could take this deep, because then when we start talking about employment, you start talking about location, where you live. I'm using me tonight, so keep it so we don't, if we don't try to hurt nobody's feelings. But where I live relative to what I get paid, I suspect if some people could look over at my bank statement, they'd probably be like, Gabe, well, why do you continue to live there? I signed another lease to stay here. I could live somewhere else and afford to pay more money and not hurt, technically, my bottom line. Now, I have to make decisions. I have to make choices. I got student loans that I haven't even breathed on, deferment. I got a 12-year-old son who's soon to be about to have a teenager. I got to think about long term. I got to think about putting him in the best position economically. I was economically strapped for years. I've talked openly about all this stuff. I was poor. I was living below the poverty line. And I'm not here to complain. I did it. It was what was set before me, and I did it. I lived just like 20 to 30 million Americans, if not more, lived at and below the poverty line. And even though now I make a few dollars, I'm gonna have to make a few dollars for a while. Please understand, it ain't just automatically I got this job and I'm making this hourly wage, therefore it's all good. No, I gotta get above water. I know that makes you uncomfortable, but when I consider my economic situation, that is number three. I'm not ranking these, but I got to think about the longevity. I got to think about medical coverage. I also got to think about, is it going to help me? Pandemic, right? This is holding pattern, not post-pandemic. We're holding pattern. Is the income that I'm making going to be enough to hold me fast? Is it going to be enough to hold me fast? I needed to carry me for, I won't get too much into my personal situation, but I'm going to need my income to carry me for a while. Trust me, more than a year. So I'm gonna need to stay healthy. I'm gonna need to keep working. I get paid hourly. I don't get a salary. So I gotta show up. I gotta show up. I gotta show up and I gotta handle business. So now I'm gonna make it my last thing and we'll just regroup and look at this. Is it a job that I feel like I can do and do for a long time without, in my case, the medical coverage, or whether you have the medical coverage or not? Okay, that doesn't matter. You just got to get it. See, that's that old 1920, 1950s thinking. And you just work. That's what you do. You just work. Talk to some elderly people. Talk to some people in their 70s and 80s and 90s who worked and worked and worked for 30 and 40 and 50 years. Put it in. Someone will tell you they have no regrets. Someone will tell you, hey, this is what I had to do. I did what I had to do. Okay, cool. But some of them will tell you, well, yeah, I kind of wish I would have went a different way. Someone will tell you that looking back now, I didn't spend any time with my kids, any time with my grandkids. I regret it. Oh yeah, they might have bought a house. They went on a trip or two. But some of them will tell you, and tell you the point blank truth, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. But they were taught, this is what you do when you get a job. And they did it. And when they retired, people applauded. They gave them a gold watch. They gave them a cake. And in some cases, you know, and I know this to be true, they gave them a swift kick out the back door. I know people who were basically forced to retire, even in the education field. They were told, you got to leave the principalship, you got to either go back into a classroom or retire. I remember a lady working at Southern Hills Elementary School, assistant principal. Assistant principal. We gave her a going away party, and when she came to the classroom to do some of her last acts, my classroom, I asked her, so what happened? And she told me. They told me I'm going to have to go back into the classroom. 38 years, cattle perish. She said, okay, I've been a principal, assistant principal for years. I haven't been in the classroom for years. And you're telling me at retirement age, I should go back into the classroom? She said, Mr. Matthews, not going to happen. She retired. She retired. See, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And even for those, hey, I don't want to leave y'all out. And for those of you who retired, or at least you thought you did, we're in the pandemic period. We're holding in the pandemic period. Some of you right now are really stressing because you're thinking, you know what, my retirement, I planned for it, but it ain't proven to be enough because I didn't plan for inflation. I didn't plan for my bills to go up. Now, some of you, you got fixed amounts on everything. Great. Good for you. But for some of you, you're not in that position. You get an SSI. See, I just want people to the whole point of Thursday nights, Let's Chat, for those who might be new, is to have a candid conversation. Because see, when you're talking about employment, you're supposed to be talking about your financial future, not just your financial present. And maybe you have never heard it that way. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you've never heard somebody say, I don't know how old you are, but maybe no one has ever said to you, excuse me, that when you pursue a job, you're really supposed to be thinking about not just your immediate. You're supposed to give some thought to your financial future. In case you don't believe me, savings account. Savings account. A savings account is supposed to be about a future consideration. And there's some stuff on that. We're not talking about, finances tonight, particularly. I'm talking about employment. But when you're talking about employment, that is directly, obviously that's finance. That's directly connected not only to your current life, but to your future. Because it's not just my son's future I have to consider my own. And in my case, I consider the cost. Yes, what happens if you end up going to the hospital? What happens if you get sick? Yeah. I am taking a chance. I am doing exactly what I told you in regards to those teenagers who are staring you in your face, who might, if they believe in themselves and they believe in their abilities, they might be able to do what you and I weren't able to do. They might be. I don't know. Again, each case is specific. They might have the wherewithal. They might. That if they have things break their way, time and chance happen to all. If they catch the right flow, they can end up making more money in 2 weeks, in a year, than you and I will make in a lifetime. Well, in that same token, for those of us who are of age, obviously I got some grays, the pandemic has forced us to consider taking risks. There it is. Risks. Gabe, you're too old. You're 48 years old. You're too old to take risks. You have to consider your health. I love you. If you're thinking that right now, I love you. I really do. But keep that to yourself. I have come to a point in my life, I'm too old to think that I can just go find a nice little secure job and just work that 20 years would have put me at 68 years old, almost 70, and hope that I'll just be okay. I'm not in a position to do that. So I've got to consider the risk reward factor. You heard me talk about that last week. I'm going to talk about it for the rest of this month, by the way. Risk benefit factor. So what am I doing? I'll share. Well, I go to the gym 5 days a week. Now, there's nothing I can do about a car accident or some rare sickness that could come out of nowhere, by the way, and still drain my savings account if I had one, and still drain my bank accounts. I know people working great jobs, had medical coverage from here on to the end of time, and unfortunately, their medical coverage didn't cover those incidents and those accidents that nobody saw coming. See, I live in the real world, and I have to deal with the truth of the real world. And I'm not going to casinos, which are up the street from me. I'm not talking about that risk, because the risk benefit is way too high on the risk end. I'm not burning up my paychecks trying to hit the big numbers so that me and my son can live lavish. I'm sure he wouldn't mind, but live lavish for the rest of my life and his life. No. I have a financial advisor that I talk to and trust, try to speak to a couple of times a month. I look into financial. I'm not deep into it yet, but trust me, I'm going to get deeper and deeper and deeper into it. I'm going to plot my financial future to whatever degree I can, starting with employment. Not just any money coming in. No, it's got to be money substantial enough to not only pay my bills, pay your bills, but it's got to be substantial enough for you to be able to now, watch this, so your employment, particularly if you're my age, has got to bring in the kind of money that will allow you to really look into Roth IRAs, look into the stock market, look into business ventures as solid as possible that will allow you to put your money to work, not you go do more work. See, some of you got this 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 job. That's 1950. That's 1960. That's 1970. That's 1970. Well, 80s to some extent. In the 80s, we had that boom of middle class jobs, and by the time you got through the 90s, the middle class jobs were gone. Listen to me. You've got to have the kind of employment if you're in your 40s like I am, 50s, 60s, and up. You've got to have enough income extra to be able to have some of your money working for you. Not just sitting around in a savings account gaining nothing, doing nothing. Gabe, I put in $42 and every little bit helps. And you 62 years old. With all due respect, unless you got a real nice retirement plan, you must be putting that money away for Christmas. So it starts with employment. See, I want to make sure you get how important this is. It starts with employment. Now, if you're past retirement, this is not a retirement broadcast. I really can't speak on retirement. Maybe I can go find somebody who can come in and talk about pre-retirement, which will probably be a great broadcast for many of you during this pandemic who were talking about retiring. I'll look into it. Who knows? If you know somebody who you think would be good, let me know. But right now, I'm talking to people like me who are working. I'm talking to people who, like me recently, March 2nd, as a matter of fact, who just had a job change or is looking for a job change. I'm talking to people who are trying to come up with a list of things to consider as they look at jobs. I think one of the things you're going to have to really get real about is not only, what's your skills? Those are the typical employment considerations, but not just what your skills are and what your likes and what your dislikes are. You're going to have to think very, very, very honestly and earnestly about your earning potential. And it may mean doing a job that you may not particularly feel you're equipped to work, but with some training. Now see how I did that? I didn't necessarily say education, but with some training, you might have the wherewithal to be able to work that job. No, you may not work that job in advance, but if you can get a solid 20 years, 25 years in on that job, even though it may not be the kind of job that you think yourself at this moment, but with some training, you could potentially do it. This is why you have pre-employment counseling. You may very well have some skills that allow you to move in. I am what's called a housing specialist. Ladies and gentlemen, outside of getting myself a house or an apartment to live in, I didn't know nothing about no housing. And I still really don't know anything. But I am a housing specialist. And when they asked me, am I willing to do the job? After they told me what the hourly wage is, I said, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Let's do it. Because the job is going to hopefully in time afford me, based on one of my projections, as a part of these considerations are projections, going to afford me the opportunity to get just enough equity, just enough financial equity built up to where I can potentially go back to school and actually get the education that will afford me to work the job I'm more qualified for, which is really counseling. I do some counseling as a housing specialist, but I'm not allowed to just do counseling because I'm not licensed. So it's masked by this notion of housing specialist, and which means I don't get paid potentially what I could get paid as a counselor. Get it? See? So I got to build some equity financially while taking care of my responsibilities and the debt that I have to manage and that I have to deal with. I've had candid conversations about bankruptcy and all those kinds of things. Again, this is not about finance, but I'm telling you, employment is, of course, a piece in your financial portfolio. Where you work, in particular in terms of your income, and those 4 areas we talked about, the longevity. Some of you may be working, let's just for the sake of it quickly call it a gateway job, a job leading to another job. And if you listen to me, that's what I'm working. It's a gateway job. The company is cool, but I'm working a gateway job. I'm working a job that I hope will lead me to another job. That it, yes, is more lucrative, and yes, is more along the lines of my actual skill. Getting people housing, that's not my skills. I'll do it. I'll fumble through it till I learn it. I'm just being candid about it. And they know this. They told me. They told me point blank. Well, Gabe, it's a learning curve. Learn on the job training. And I'm doing it. On the same token, I have the potential to, with the right next education, licensing, whatever the case may be, transition into something a bit more substantial. Now, my window is not going to be huge. So when I'm talking about employment, I've got to, and I'm just using me specifically so I can show you how this works specifically. But for you and for your children who are graduating from high school or from college, maybe even a spouse, I don't know. If you want to offer them some support and you don't really know how to do that as they're talking to you about a career change, might be your husband, might be your wife, a fiance, and you're a little concerned that they haven't thought it through. Play this video for them. Watch it with them. You might not even agree with every single point I make, but watch it with them. Watch it with them. Highlight those points that I'm making that you think that maybe they need to really think about. They may want to shift into a career. They have great medical coverage and they have pre-existing conditions. And you're not trying to discourage them away from their dream, but you need them to consider how are they going to substantiate their medical life, their medical issues, while trying to transition into a potential job that does not offer them the kind of medical coverage they need. And it's not trying to lock them in. That's not what, hopefully it's not what you're trying to do. Please don't use this video to try to say Gabe is saying you have to step. No, that's not what I'm saying. I haven't said it, and I'm not saying it, and I'm not going to say it because I don't believe that. There may be a particular kind of medical coverage out there that if you do the research, they can acquire and transition. See, there's a will, there's a way. Oh, trust me, I'm looking at the medical piece as well. It ain't got past me. Trust me. I'm not getting into that. I'm done. Pre-employment, my encouragement to you directly, plot a course. Don't just look at the jobs where you like them, you like it or you don't like it. How much money? Look at it for its longevity. Look at it for if it's offering medical coverage and what that coverage actually entails. Look at it for, is it a job that you like? Because it may be a job that ain't going nowhere. I would never do nursing. Those jobs are not going anywhere for the most part. But I would not do nursing. I don't want to poke nobody with no needles. I don't want to be cleaning bedpans unless it's a sick loved one. Then I'm doing it because that's my family. But I don't want to be cleaning the bedpans of strangers. I'm not squeamish when it comes to blood, but I stay away from it when I see the need. When I have an opportunity, I tend to stay away from it. Just saying. But nursing is one of those fields that's going to be there. Truth of the matter is, lawyers, even politicians. Politicians ain't going nowhere because government isn't going anywhere. Some of those jobs don't pay anything. Some of them pay. Do I want to be a politician? No. I don't even have the chops. Sales ain't never going anywhere. Now, sales of a certain sort, yeah, but sales in general ain't going anywhere. It's not going anywhere at all. So you might want to transition into something that's a bit more lively and take a chance on yourself and get into sales. More power to you. More power to you. But you got to make sure you plot your course. You got to. You got to plot your course. Longevity. You got to look at medical. You got to look at whether or not you like the job. You got to. There's a lot of other factors. Location. I mean, there's all kind of factors, ladies and gentlemen. All kind of factors. Is there a chance for promotion if that's something that's important to you? All I'm saying to you is recognize you're in a pandemic. We're holding in a pandemic. The projections suggest there's going to be another pandemic probably coming right behind this one. We see this one really truly isn't over because Omicron and all of them are just, variants. They're not going completely away. Boosted. People who have been boosted have gotten it. And yes, they've lived. So I'm not knocking. I'm not here to talk about vaccine. I'm just here to encourage you to plot your course. All right. That being said, I promise to be done early. We're done before 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. Have a great rest of your evening and week. We'll be back next Thursday with another pre-counseling area of life. Now, clearly, we are, if you haven't picked up on it for the last 2 weeks, we are encouraging you get pre-advice. If you haven't picked up on it yet, we are advocating for getting pre-advice, pre-education advice, pre-employment advice, and we'll be back to advocate for pre-engagement, pre-marital, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head. Yes, the last two is pre-engagement and pre-marital. All right, till next week, have a good one.